Hello everyone, welcome back to another edition of the Lynn Lowdown. I'm Danny Vittori, and today we have two members from Lynn Public Schools to discuss the new cell phone policy. Thanks so much for coming on. Would you just mind introducing yourselves real quick?
Sure. I'm Eric Dugan. I'm on the school committee, and I'm the policy chair. So it was my role to kind of encourage this forward to the full committee. So I'm looking forward to talking about it today.
Thank you, and my name's Charlie Gallo. I'm the compliance officer for the Lynn Public Schools. One of my roles is to help the administration and help the school committee through Chairperson Dugan with creating, changing, and implementing new policies.
And I even said before we started this interview, my phone is in my office because the last thing I need is for it to go off during a cell phone, because that would happen to me.
Yeah, right. Mine's on silent, so we're good. Yeah.
So this new policy was just recently implemented back in June 26th. That's right?
June 26th, yes.
So it's not hugely different from the policy you already had, but would you be able to explain if some of the major differences that are going to go into effect?
Yeah, sure. Like you said, it's not hugely different. It's always been something that the Lynn Public Schools has asked of our students to not have the phones always off and away. The biggest difference is at lunch and in the hallways. We're asking now that students to have them off and away at those times as well. Biggest part of that is just to have consistency across the schools. We were seeing that, for example, maybe at classical they were allowed at lunch, whereas English they weren't, or vice versa, So we really want to try to bring consistency to the schools. I don't know if Charlie wanted to add to that, but
No, I think that's correct, and with purposes that we're trying to promote engaged learning, development of social skills,
right.
And general well-being, and we can talk about those things certainly as well. But facets of that, having the same rule at every school, we think will really help our students succeed.
It's, like you said, the consistency. It's not one rule over here, one rule over there. It's just, this is the blanket rule.
Correct, yeah, correct.
And for Lynn specifically, students, they can have their phones, they just have to be off and away. It's not like you're collecting them or putting them away or anything.
Correct. So procedurally, that'll kind of work out within the schools, but kids can bring their phones to school. I think that's a misconception that as I'm, it's a campaign season, so I'm out in the public, kind of making my argument why people should elect me again, but that's a misconception. A lot of people, what's this new policy? The kids can't bring their phones to school, but they can. The children can bring their phones to school. They just need to be off, out of sight, silent when they get to school and during learning time. And like you said, it kind of avoids distractions during learning time, and it hopefully increases engagement, when they're in front of those teachers and they're learning, which is, ultimately the goal of school. So.
And Charlie, you were speaking about another misconception of it too, which is parents can still get in contact with their children, so can they you go through the school instead of just texting them at lunch or something? Exactly
right, and that's so important that parents and students, go through official channels to contact each other during the school day. If a child needed to be dismissed, the school would need to know where that child's going, so it's important they do that and not offline, do that just through the school office, and so we're having sort of a theme of shared responsibility in this. The school will play its part. We're asking families to play their part and students to play their part to implement this policy.
And I know there's also some chatter at the state level. There may be something going through there which is a little bit different, but again, along the same lines. Was that one of the reasons for you to change this policy now, or were there other factors that went into it?
Yeah, so that's definitely a big factor, in my mind at least. I wanted to get ahead of this, at least being the policy chair. And, Charlie and I really talked about this much earlier in the year, really kind of in the fall and winter. We started having conversations about this because just speaking from the Lynn delegates and speaking to the Lynn delegates, we sort of knew this was coming. They kind of said, hey, this is what's happening at the state level. So right now it's unanimously passed in the Senate, a bell-to-bell cell phone ban across the state. So all districts, if this passes in the House, all districts will need to create a policy that implements a bell-to-bell cell phone ban. So in my mind, this gave us an opportunity to get ahead of it, which I think is important for Lynn to be ahead of the curve on things like this. So we'll be able to see how this goes this year, revisit it, see what happens at the state level, but from everything I've heard, it's probably going to pass the House fairly easily. And then Governor Haley has already been on record saying that if it comes to her desk, she's going to approve it. So it looks like this is our future. It looks like this is definitely going to pass. So I think, like I said, this really gives us an opportunity to be ahead of it at the local level and give us an opportunity to revisit, if the state, maybe is a little looser on what they want, or maybe they're a little tighter on what they want.
Right.
It gives us a year to practice with our students, and maybe we nailed it. Who knows? But we'll definitely revisit and see what we need to do.
It gives you a base level to at least start from, so you're not scrambling to try to keep up with state regulations. It's, well, we already have this policy, and like you said, maybe it works great, we don't have to change it, or maybe you just tweak it instead of having to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, and do this next year when you're trying to catch up.
Exactly.
And in terms of, I know, well, Eric, you mentioned it a little bit, you had several reasons why you specifically supported doing this change, and Charlie asked you that as well, but would you mind starting with that?
Yeah, sure. So there's three real reasons I support it. So when Charlie and I first started the conversation, I like to do my due diligence on things like this. Being the policy chair, individual research on my end is really important. And one of the books that struck me that I read was called The Anxious Generation. And the author of that book, Jonathan Haidt, he lays out an argument that since 2012, mental illness has risen in teens significantly. To kind of coincide with that, another number is at that time, 2012, 70% of teens said that they also own smartphones, in that date. So, and there's a steep, uprise of mental illness at that time too. So I don't think that's a coincidence. And he lays out four kind of reasons for that. One is sleep deprivation, and we're all guilty of that. Just last night I didn't get a lot of sleep. I was playing a game on my phone, and before you know it, it's 2 a.m. And I think as an adult, I can kind of cope and get through my day, but as a teen, that's a little bit harder,
Right.
As a youth, it's harder, and, that 8 hours of sleep is really important. Social deprivation is something else he mentions, that they're not having that face-to-face contact with their family, with their peers. So that's caused some of it. Attention fragmentation, and this is kind of what we've seen in our schools. It's hard for teachers to compete with TikTok and Instagram Reels. Was that quick kind of 15-second. There's that instant gratification. So when they have those things in class, it's impossible. Not hard. It's impossible for teachers to compete with that. And then finally, kids are addicted to it. We're all addicted to it. Kids aren't addicted to it. We're all addicted to our phones. And to say I'm not guilty of it would be lying. I'm very much addicted to my phone, and that's when I leave my house. Phone, wallet, keys. Where's my phone? And my whole life is on it. So that's first reason. I've done my due diligence. I've done my research, and that book kind of sticks in my brain as one of them. The other one is a lot of teachers reached out to me over the last several years, and being a teacher myself too. I teach 3rd grade, but even at that level, you see it. Kids they're sneaking their phones, and it's troubling being a teacher. But then Lynn teachers were reaching out to me too and saying, we really need to kind of do something about this. So that was another really important part when you're hearing from teachers. And they're saying to you that we're struggling with this, help us out. And so this is an attempt at that. And then finally, we already touched upon it, that we knew the state mandate was coming.
Yep.
So to be ahead of it, in my mind, is a really important detail that we couldn't just ignore. And so those are my 3 real big reasons that I support it, but I also want to acknowledge, families' concerns. I understand that in an emergency, they want to be in touch with their children. When my child was a senior at Classical, there was a stabbing at the school. My wife and I, we freaked out, we freaked out. And we wanted to be in touch, so I get that. But what we also need to remember is that the administration, the teachers, they train for things like this. They have lockdown procedures. They as schools approaching, they're going to be training with Officer Mackin, our resource officer, and going over all these things. And so we do have to trust the adults and trust that they're trained for this and trust that they're going to take care of our children. And the other part is if kids are on their phones, I've talked to lots of police officers. You're flooding those lines, and that makes it really difficult for our first responders as well. So you put all those things together, and this is why I'm a supporter of this policy. So, but again, I do want to acknowledge the concerns. They are valid, very valid concerns, but I do support this policy.
No, you have all that research to back it
Yeah.
up. So, and you have it from the policy chair, teacher perspective, and then you, Charlie, you're the compliance officer. So why do you think?
Sure. So I was happy to help with this policy. Chairperson Dugan and I and members of the administration spoke a while back about it for all the reasons that you so articulately spoke of. And a number of principals came to me as well around that time saying we need calibrated practices district-wide across all high schools, and also expectations to be set at earlier grades so that when we get to middle school, when we get to high school, we know what the rules are. So this is gradual, this is moderate. It is not a total prohibition on all devices. It is something that will be gradual and moderate in preparation for maybe something more strict happening at the state level. We don't know, but we hope, even if nothing happens at the state level, that this will promote engaged learning. This will promote social skills. So at lunchtime, we're talking to each other. We're not, just on our phones.
Yeah.
And the well-being of students. No one can deny, the cyberbullying, cheating, inappropriate imagery that comes across on phones, but also, and Chairperson Dugan was smart to talk about the safety aspect. In an emergency, and as a parent, you'd want, of course, to have access to your child, but we need to keep those lines open for police and first responders. We need not to have individuals in the community sort of rush to scenes because we need those roads open. So using official channels rather than sort of cell phone is what's going to help everybody in those types of situations. The last thing you would ever want is a cell phone going off, or a voice to be heard, or a vibration to be heard in those kinds of situations. So, of course, families are thinking about those issues, but just stepping back in big picture, this policy really helps to put our students in the safest possible light.
I think another part too that we didn't touch on is their recording devices too, and
That's true.
there has been, unfortunately, students record other students in compromising situations, and so we do need to think about the privacy of our students, and that's a really big, part of as a school committee member, we do need to think about that. There are lots of legal aspects to that, where if kids are walking around with recording devices all day, that poses difficulty, so there is that part of it as well. So I just wanted to add that too.
But like you said, it's the safety piece, it's keeping them engaged, it's doing all of these positive things for the students themselves. And of course, if there's any violations for it, it's kind of the standard for breaking any of the rules. You may contact parents, confiscate, et cetera, right?
It is, and I'm so glad that you asked about that, Danny, because what we've done over the summer since this passed in preparation for the school year is very carefully planned out proactive measures. So there has been messaging that's gone out to all families from the superintendent, and many schools have adopted it. There have been posters in English and Spanish. There will be positive messaging, not singling out and confrontational with students, but positive messaging and reminders through the day, not just in response to violations, but really setting that tone. And it's going to be gradual, and it's going to take some time to do, but we hope that approach will work better than automatic suspension or something along those lines.
Yeah, and I had mentioned addiction too. We can't just expect kids to just end that addiction. So there's going to be progressive, warning, but eventually, the warnings do need to end, and we do need to have some type of discipline, but it's not going to be, we're taking your phone forever. I think there is a concern too with families that, we've paid money for this phone, you can't just take it. That's not what our plan is, but, and kids are, like I said, kids are addicted. So you can't just, you got to wean off, so, and that's the plan.
You can't just take it and go, all right.
Yep, that addiction's cured. Yeah, no, it's just because we said so, but that's not how it works. Yeah.
No, but it's clearly you've done a ton of research. All the policies are fair and as open as you can to the students, the teachers, parents, everyone. And I know after I've been a moment, it always goes by so quickly, but was there anything else I hadn't covered that you wanted to make sure I mentioned before we wrapped up?
No, I think, I'm looking forward to just working with families on this. Like I said, I know it's a change. I get it. To not be able to get in touch with your child immediately is a change. And I acknowledge that. Being a parent myself, I know that is going to be difficult. But I think what we need to remember is sometimes our anxieties are our anxieties, and we can't put them on our children. And the schools are there to help. The schools are there to help, not hurt. hurt. And I think our teachers get into being a teacher myself, I know, we get into the business because we care for our students. We love our students. And I guarantee that every teacher you're going to talk to is going to say this exact same thing, that they're going to help you through this. And, you know, exceptions are going to be made. The other part that we didn't mention is that if a student's on an IEP or a 504, or they have some type of medical concern, you know, we can work with those families too. If they need their phone for, you know, different things for medical reasons, you know, we'll work through that and make sure, you know, teachers know who those students are and I can identify those students. So we're going to work with families. You know, it isn't going to be something that is going to be, you know, harsh and immediately, you know, discipline. We're going to work with you, but ultimately, this is what we feel is best for our students and best for our teachers, and going to get the best learning in our schools.
For sure. All right, what was there? Say, all right, we wrapped it up. You articulated it well, like you said. All right, well, I have to thank you again so much, both of you, for coming on, really sharing this policy, and really shedding some light. I know I've learned a lot from this.
Thanks, Danny.
Thank you.
Of course, anytime, and of course, you can look into these cell phone policies yourself if you have any more questions. But for now, I'm Danny Vittori. This has been the Lynn Lowdown, and we'll see you next week with more guests.